All right, signs of the last days. What will the second coming look like? Now, I've got to tell you I got a couple of pet peeves that play into tonight's talk. One of the pet peeves is when they take and they jump all over the Bible and take a little text here and a little text there and put them all together and make a heap. Okay, so we're not going to do that tonight. These texts are so clear about what happens at the end of time. Now, of course, they don't tell us when. In fact, he even tells us in the text he doesn't tell us when. But they are so clear about what's going to happen that I'm going to take just two texts tonight. And I'll take one little bit of a third text, but I'm going to take mostly just two texts, and we're going to read right through them. And the first one is, well, this is one of those other ones. Would you read this one with me? Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you, so that you will always be with me where I am. Now, on the second coming, I'm not sure we need to know any more than that. It seems to me that that is a promise worth all the rest of the texts in the Bible. Because if we have any special hope for the future, that's the hope for the future right there. That not only are we talking here about Jesus' promise to come get us, but look at that. Doesn't that text just ring with his desire to come and take us home? That text just speaks to my heart. It doesn't speak to my ears. It doesn't speak to my eyes. It speaks to my heart, and it says, I want to come and make you my roommate. And I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so here's the big text. 1 Thessalonians, and it goes from 4:13 into 5s. So if you have a Bible, you can follow along. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. All the translations read pretty much the same. Where they're a little bit different, I'll tell you. But here's what it says. And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died. The word there is fallen asleep. Okay? In Greek, it says fallen asleep. But he says, we want you to know what has happened to those who have died, so that you will not grieve like people who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. Now, you can see why that text could be a little confusing, couldn't you? It says he's going to bring them back. So where does that put them now? We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. Okay? But here's what it says. We tell you this directly from the Lord. What does that mean? Why would he put that line in there? That's weird. He says, we're writing this directly from the Lord. Have you ever heard Paul say, this is Paul writing and not the Lord? He did that. He did that on a couple of occasions. He says, this is my opinion, not the Lord. Here he says, this is the Lord. I can think is that Paul received some special revelation on this subject, or he wouldn't have started the sentence with that. Okay? I wouldn't start a sentence unless I had received special revelation from God. So he says, It's my battery? Do you think I'm losing my battery? No, it says I have good battery. All right? We who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet him ahead of those who have died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the Christians who have died will rise from their graves. Then, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever. Isn't that good news? Now, he goes on to say some other things of why that's such good news. And I think it's great news, but I think what's really interesting about this is here's a statement from Paul that he received directly from God. And it says, the Lord will come down out of heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. Does that sound like a quiet event? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then he says, everybody is going to kind of fly. I don't see any other way to do this without flying. Do you? Now, I don't have any wings, so I guess I'm going to fly in the same way that Peter walked on water, right? By extended flight grace. Have you ever known anybody like that? Their daughter works for Delta, and so they get to fly every place for free? That's extended flight grace. I think I'm going to have some extended flight grace from God on this one. It says, we who are still alive and remain will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and then we will be with the Lord forever. Okay, so we got to talk about this. It's a very interesting subject. I've done a bunch of research on it. I don't know if you've done a bunch of research on it or not, but this is so fascinating. A lot of evangelicals in the United States of America believe in a doctrine called the secret rapture. Okay? You got to distinguish that because the word rapture isn't in the Bible at all. And so we use the term rapture for the second coming being taken up in the clouds, just what we just read. I mean, that's what they mean by rapture. But there are a few texts that some people use to say, look, it looks like we're going to be raptured secretly. And those texts, the most prominent of those texts is the one that says, there will be two spinning at a wheel. One will be taken, the other will be left. And that text alone is the only one that to me even resembles the secret rapture. But let's look at the secret rapture. Here's one of my pet peeves that I told you I was going to tell you about. I really detest it when people argue by setting up a straw man. Do you know what that means, setting up a straw man? I'll give you an example. The president attacked Mitt Romney during the campaign, saying he's a hard-edged conservative. And then he proceeded to attack all of his conservative philosophies, right? Well, Mitt Romney is no more a hard-edged conservative than I am a pancake. He was the governor of Massachusetts. He was pro-choice. He's absolutely the opposite of a hard-edged conservative. He was as moderate as conservatives come. He was fiscally conservative, I'll agree with you. But he was not a conservative until he ran for national office. While he was running for office in Massachusetts, you don't get elected to governor of Massachusetts being a hard-edged conservative. You just don't. So the president set him up as a straw man, this hard-edged conservative. So then he was all surprised when he showed up at the debate and didn't seem very conservative. Well, here's why I'm telling you this. I want to tell the secret rapture doctrine the best way I know how, and I'm not trying to cloud it or shade it, okay? Here's what the secret rapture doctrine, I understand it, is. Number one, the 70 weeks we talked about 2 nights ago, the 70 weeks, you know, it was broken up in Daniel, 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and then 1 week, right? The pre-tribulation rapturists take the 70th week and move it off to the future. They take it and send it. And what they do is they say that's the week in which begins with the secret rapture. God's people are taken. And during that week, other things happen. The Jews are evangelized. 144,000 Jews, actual blood Jews, are sealed. Christ appears. And then Christ comes back with all the saved as a band of warriors and ends the conflict forever. Now, I'm not trying to shade it. That's exactly what it is. But we've got to ask, is it in the Bible? And where does it come from? And I'm going to touch on a couple of delicate things because I've got to tell you where it comes from. It comes from, nobody taught taught the secret rapture until about 1800. Before 1800, you can search the church fathers, you can search the Roman Catholic Church, you can search old Christian writings, and nobody taught it. At about the time of 1800 to 1850, several people came up with it at the same time. Most of them were in Scotland, interestingly. They were Presbyterians. They were Presbyterians who were revitalizing their spiritual life, and they were beginning the movement that we now know of as the Pentecostal movement. They were speaking in tongues. They were, what do we call it in the South? We call it falling out, having fainting, and other manifestations of the Spirit. And during one of these manifestations of the Spirit, one of the adherents to this little, I won't call it a denomination because they were still Anglicans at the time, Presbyterians at the time, said she received a vision and that Christ's second coming was going to be in 2 phases. And one phase was going to be the secret rapture, and the second phase was going to be after the 7 years. A few years before that, there was a pretty strong movement in the Roman Catholic Church. We'll go back in history to Martin Luther. Martin Luther began to study the Bible after his leaving the Roman Catholic Church, and he found a lot of things about a little horn power and some other things that disturbed him greatly, because every time he studied them, every time he put his mind to it, every time he tried to work it out, it kept drawing him back that the harlot of Revelation and the little horn power was the papacy. His old friends, the Church of the Roman Catholics. And he began to teach that. And the Roman Catholic Church formed an organization to counter the Reformation. And they called it the Jesuits. And a Jesuit scholar from Chile, Ribera, came up with this concept. He said, look, move the 70th week out to the future. Then we have to have a physical Antichrist that is not the papacy. And I hate to tell you, but all the scholarship seems to agree that that's where the 70-week breaking came from. Is a Jesuit named Ribera came up with a way to cast suspicion for the Antichrist off of the papacy. Now, you need to do your own research and see, but that's the research I did, and that's where it led me. I didn't like it. I don't like to have to talk about it. I don't like to have to talk about calling any of our Christian brothers or anything, any kind of names, but our friend Martin Luther cast this die against the Roman Catholic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church fought back by splitting up the 70-week prophecy. So when this young lady in Scotland had the vision, they combined that together, and a fellow named Darby, anybody ever heard of the Darby Bible? A fellow named Darby adopted the thing, put these two things together, and it got included in the notes to the Scofield Study Bible about 100 years ago. And the notes to the Scofield Study Bible were so widely used and so widely read that probably 30 to 40% of American Christians now believe in the secret rapture. Again, the word rapture is never found in the Bible. The word secret rapture is certainly never found. And the doctrine is hard to accommodate. When you read what we just read, I'll go back one slide. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with a voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. That doesn't seem secret to me. I don't know how you make that secret. I don't know how that can possibly be defined as secret, but here is the problem. The problem is that the doctrine offers a couple of really good things. Good thing number one is it gives the comfort of believing that Christians will not have to face the last tribulation. And that's very comforting to many people. And the second part is that it gives a second chance. If you've read the Left Behind books, you know that when the main characters evaporate, or the pre-main characters evaporate, the remaining main characters are converted and have an opportunity of a second chance. Both of those are very comforting ideas. Unfortunately, they are not biblical ideas. They are merely comforting. Now, concerning, and I'm just reading straight along the same text. We went from chapter 4 to chapter 5. Now, concerning how and when this will happen, dear brothers and sisters, we don't really need to write you, for you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly, like a thief in the night. Okay, now this is the one I told you. He wrote in the same text, you don't know when it's going to happen. Now, we know that Paul believed that it was going to probably happen in his lifetime. He wrote a lot of stuff. He believed it was going to happen in his lifetime. And ever since Paul, Christian after Christian after Christian, Evans and I have talked about this, all believe it's going to happen right now. We know because Ellen White wrote lots of books that she believed it was just imminent. But she's in good company with not being right about that. Because Paul believed it. John believed it. Peter believed it. They all thought that it was just that imminent. And what's wrong with that? It's all right to believe that. You know what? I don't care when it is. We're going to look at some texts here that are going to tell us exactly when it's going to be. And that is in the future. For you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly like a thief in the night. Well, now, it's easy to say that, and then you go and look at the parable of the 10 virgins, right? And you say, well, then we won't know. We just go to sleep and wait, right? When people are saying everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains, and there will be no escape. But you aren't in the dark about these things, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised when the day of the Lord comes as a thief. Isn't that interesting? So he says, it's going to come as a thief, but not to you. You're going to be the wise virgins who kept their oil ready and kept their wicks trimmed and were ready to light the lamps and proclaim the return of Jesus. He said, you're going to be ready. He says, for you are all children of the light and of the day. We don't belong to the darkness and the night. So be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Stay alert, be clear-headed. Night is the time when people sleep and drinkers get drunk. And then he goes into an interesting allusion. He talks about having a sword and a shield. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Oh, I stuck this one in here because this text is so good for me. I just love this one. I stuck it in several times. You'll see it appear from time to time. This is the one we read together. Whenever these texts seem like something bad's about to happen, I like to look at this one. It says, don't let your heart be troubled. Is that a suggestion? No, that's a command, isn't it? He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust in me. There's more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. Okay, let us who live in the light be clear-headed, protected by the armor of faith and love, wearing as our helmet the confidence of our salvation. For God chose to save us through our Lord Jesus Christ, not to pour out his anger on us. Christ died for us so that whether we are dead or alive when he returns, we can live with him forever. So encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. Did you see the allusion in there? He says, the armor of faith, wearing as our helmet the confidence of salvation. What would that have meant to a first century audience? You know about the Romans, right? They had one of the most disciplined armies that ever existed. And what happened to a Roman guard that was supposed to stand guard at night if he fell asleep? Death penalty. No questions asked, no trial required. They were killed. And so these soldiers knew that they had to stay awake. And it's interesting that Paul would use a reference to that exact event that these people knew about. He said, you need to stay awake. We're not people of the night, we're people of the day. Now, the other text that I want to share with you is from Matthew. And it's an interesting text. There's a parallel text in Luke that you can look at. And it says, as Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. Now, I think that's an interesting text. I'm picturing this, okay? Walk with me back to the first century. Here's Jesus, God of the universe. By this point, they kind of know. This is Matthew 24, right? They've already discerned he's the Messiah. They discerned he's the Messiah. And if they know that he's the Messiah, they already know he's the guy that designed the tabernacle in the wilderness and gave the plan for the temple to Solomon. David, right? And so they're walking with the God of the universe, the Messiah, and they say, hey, look, aren't those nice buildings? Here's the building. This is apparently what Herod's temple looked like. And you'll look at this temple and you'll see, not only did it have the holy and most holy place here, it looks like it has little classrooms around here. And it has a building all the way around with colonnades. And then it had a larger building all the way around the Temple Mount with colonnades. Now, if you've ever seen those folks that cry at the Wailing Wall, that's one of these outer walls. That's not any of these walls, right? It's one of these outer walls out here. And so they weep at what's remaining of one of these outer walls because Jesus said, do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of the other. What was he talking about? Anybody know? The second coming? No. AD 70, right? He was warning them about an event that was going to occur in 70 AD, which is going to be when Jerusalem was defeated for the last time, essentially. And Jerusalem, you know, the Romans, they're big on when they defeat something, they want it to stay defeated. And so they took apart all the nice buildings. And they did it every time. The Romans were famous. You've ever heard of scorched earth? Scorched earth. You know what the Romans used to do? They used to plow up people's fields that they defeated, and they would pour salt into them so that they never again could grow a crop. That's called scorched earth. You can never again grow a crop here. This means that this place is defeated, and it's not going to be populated again. Scorched earth. That's what that means. Crazy. So the Romans were big on really destroying, and so when the Romans finally destroyed Jerusalem, they took it apart piece by piece. Then it says, this is the same text, it goes on, it says, later Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him and privately and said, tell us, when will all this happen? The real Greek text says, when will all these things happen? They're asking a plural question to a singular comment. Very important to note that. Because then he says, what sign or signal will return? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? Now, this is the best description in the whole Bible of the signs of the last days. So let's look at this. Jesus told them, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. Okay, so the first thing he says to them, he says, probably you shouldn't let anybody mislead you. No, that's another command, isn't it? Don't let anyone mislead you. I'm about to tell you what the second coming is going to look like so that you cannot be confused about it. I'm going to tell you before that happens, a whole bunch of people are going to come and they're going to claim to be me, but they aren't going to be me. Have you heard of this guy? He's in Puerto Rico. He actually says that he met God and God made him one with Jesus. Can you read that down there on his chest? It says, Jesucristo hombre. In other words, that's his slogan. It's Jesus in man. He has the numbers 666 tattooed on his arm Because he says not only is he the Christ, he's also the Antichrist. Don't ask me how that works. I guess you'd have to be in Puerto Rico to understand it. Mary Ellen was born in Puerto Rico. I hold her responsible for this. Everybody knows who he is. He was the Messiah until a few months ago when he died. Everybody know who he is? Yes. I'm just wondering, we have some young people here, and they don't catch up on. The young people won't know who that is at all. Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it? Kids, don't even think about it. I remember I knew a kid once, and when that event happened, the parents threw away all the Time magazines from the house so they wouldn't have to hear about it. It was just too grisly for a young child to have to hear about. If everybody remembers that, it was horrible. Just horrible. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you, so that you will always be with me where I am. Have you ever been separated from somebody you're in love with? I went to go work in Houston when I was dating Mary Ellen, and we had a lot of letters we wrote between each other. A lot of letters. And whenever a chance came, we would get together. I would drive up there. A couple times she even came down to Houston to visit me. It was excruciating to be apart. When I read this text, it just sounds like he wants to come and get us as soon as he can, doesn't it? And you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. These things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And here are the statistics. You can see here that we've got World War II. Estimates between 60 and 78 million people died. The 13th century Mongolian conquest is second on the line. The Qing dynasty conquest of the Ming dynasty, 25 million. World War I, 20 million. The Taiping Rebellion, the Chinese apparently know how to kill very well, don't they? The Second Sino-Japanese War, 2 million. The White Lotus Rebellion in China, 16 million. The Anxi Rebellion, 13 million. The Warring States era of China, 10 million. The Dungan Revolt, 8 million to 12 million. On and on and on, we have wars and more wars. These are about the top 30. But there are lots more than that. It says there will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Okay, so here are the famines. It's interesting to me about the famines. In the 13th century, I know we had trouble counting them in the old days because you don't know how many people really died. But here are famines from the 13th century. Here are famines from the 14th century. 15th century, 16th century, 17th century. Wow. Things really picked up, right? 18th century, had a little decline there. 19th century, I had to shrink the print down to make it fit. This is the 19th century, 200,000, famine in Egypt. Potato famine, Highland potato famine in Scotland. Never even knew that one happened. And this is the 20th century. I really had to shrink the print down for the 20th century. And here in the 21st century, we have some droughts that have not yet developed into full-fledged famines. But we have a lot of people that are on the verge of death. We have a church member here from Sudan, and he can tell you about what's happening in Sudan. We have some people here who have been to Malawi. And it says here that Malawi's got a food crisis right now. And of course, there's the Zimbabwe crisis. We've got several members here from Zimbabwe when Robert Mugabe caused a famine single-handedly. Earthquakes, it said. Here are the frequency of earthquakes. Here are the severity of earthquakes. Look at the years. This is 1973 to 2006. This is 1900 to 2008. So the severity and the frequency and the severity of earthquakes are both increasing dramatically. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. There's more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. Here's a promise. Then you'll be arrested, persecuted, killed. You'll be hated all over the world because you are my followers. It says one believer will turn in another. I don't know about you. I'm not enthusiastic about being arrested. But you know what? I don't put it past any government. It's happening in other parts of the world right now. Would you like to be a Christian in Egypt today? Did you hear the headline that today is that the Egyptian right wing is anxious to blow up the pyramids and the Sphinx? That's the big headline. Because they're pagan symbols. And Islam cannot tolerate pagan symbols. So they want to blow up the Sphinx and the pyramids. I don't have to exercise my imagination very much to see any of the events that we've been talking about on Friday night culminating in our government deciding that people that are Christians, people who are sincere Christians, people who refuse to do what the government tells them to do if it's against their conscience, are the enemy. And I can certainly see that happening. Many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. So let me ask you a question. Why is it doing that? We turned that off, didn't we? I thought I did. The question is this. Is sin rampant in our world? Now you say, is it rampant compared to other eras? Because we know that there were some bad things happen in other eras, don't we? We know there were some real sin going on in other eras. So I did a little research. This is the Government Corruption Index. These are, the darker the color, the more corrupt people perceive their governments to be. Look at that. Canada beats us. What do you think of that? It's just because there are fewer people there. Canada beats us. Australia looks like it might beat us a little bit. But look over here. All this part of the world, they believe their government is completely corrupt. Evil is rampant. I don't see any other way of counting that. There's my favorite text again. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached through the whole world so that all nations will hear it. And then the end will come. Now, the parallel text in Luke is really interesting because the parallel text in Luke says that you're going to be brought before the state. And you're going to be questioned before the state. And when you're questioned before the state, it says, don't rehearse what you're going to say. It says, because this is going to be my opportunity to testify through you. Isn't that beautiful? He says, you're going to be questioned before the state. Just let me speak through you at that time because I'm going to show the state my gospel through your mouth. And there will be strange signs in the sun and moon and stars. And here on earth, nations will be in turmoil, perplexed by the roaring seas and strange tides. People will be terrified. People will be terrified at what they see coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then everyone will see the Son of Man coming on the cloud with a power and great glory. Everyone will see it. Does that sound secret? Everyone will see it. Now, I don't know how that works. Some people say it's going to be because television. Everybody's going to see it on television. Because, see, the world being round makes it difficult for everyone to see the same thing at the same time, doesn't it? And so I see this being a global cataclysmic event. This is not a little event. This is not a big event. This is an overwhelming event. This is an end of the world event. So when all these things begin to happen, it says, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. Is that another suggestion? No suggestion there, is it? It says, stand and look up. What do you think about people in wheelchairs? Will they stand and look up? It's a command, isn't it? I think they will. What about people who have no legs? Will they stand and look up? I think they will. I think when Jesus commands you to stand up, it's sort of like when he says to Lazarus, come out of the tomb. I think he's going to empower everybody to stand up and look up, for our salvation is near. Now, friends, we can go on, and we can look at this, but I think if we do the research, you'll find that the Bible's teaching on the second coming and what we can expect is absolutely consistent throughout. There are a few texts that people cling on to, and they want to say, well, you know, and those books, 16 volumes of the Left Behind series are very compelling, aren't they? But you know, I've read lots of fiction books that are compelling. It didn't cause me to change my theology. There's a nonfiction book from which I get my theology. It's called the Bible. And you know what? There's this text that I can't get past. He says that in his Father's house, there's plenty of room. And he said, I'm telling you this because I want to come. I want to retrieve you. My brother was a Marine captain. We were so proud of him. Oh my, how proud we were. He was a Marine captain, and he was in Vietnam. He was in Vietnam. And he did 2 tours of Vietnam as a Marine captain on a tank unit. So he had tanks. And he got an award one time. I said, how did you get the award? Now, he's deceased now, so I don't get to actually ask him about all this anymore. But I asked him, how did you get this? What did you get the award for? He said, my unit was on one side of the river, and we got orders on the radio that we were to take the other side of the river. So we crossed the river, we took the other side, heavy fighting, we secured the other side, and we held it as we were told to do. He said, then we heard on the radio that we were supposed to fall back and let the other side go. So we fell back and we let the other side go. And when we got back, we found out that we were a man short. So I gave the order, we retook the other bank, we found our man, we brought him back. We live in an occupied land. The prince of this world is the prince of darkness. This is not God's plan for the earth. He wants to come back and rescue us from the other side. He has promised he'll do it when the time is right. He told us that even he didn't know the time. Only the Father, and the Father would reveal it to him at the right time. And in our text, my favorite text, he says, when the time is right, when his Father tells him now is the time, he's going to come back and he's going to rescue us. And there's not going to be any secrets about it. There's not going to be any second chances. He says, stay awake and be ready, because the time is coming that I'm going to come and rescue you. Now, can we know when it is? No, we can't know when it is. Is it soon? We can't know. Soon compared to what? It's sooner now than it was yesterday. It'll be sooner tomorrow than it is today. Paul thought it was going to be in his lifetime. Do I think it's going to be in my lifetime? I don't know. But he gave me some comfort through Paul, saying, doesn't matter if you're dead, doesn't matter if you're alive, we're all going to be rescued together. And why are we rescued? And this is the most important part. Why are we rescued? We're rescued because he loves us. For a long time, Marilyn and I had to live apart. We wished we didn't have to live apart, but we lived apart. I asked her to marry me. She said no. Well, I didn't formally ask her. I just kind of felt her out, you know. And no. And then one day, She was going to some meetings. You have to ask her the rest of the story. She was going to some meetings. Morris Venden was speaking. And she just felt impressed that now was the time to say yes. Couldn't have been happier. I made her a cake, and I wrote on the cake, "Will you marry me?" And we ate it together. We took a picture of it, but I don't know where the picture is. Jesus loves us so much that he is waiting. He's on the very edge of his feet. He wants to come and rescue us. When the time is right, he says the gospel has to go to the whole world. He says there's going to be persecution. There's going to be difficulty. He says, in this world you will have trouble. But don't be afraid. I've overcome the world. I will return so that you may always be with me. And that's the beautiful thing. You know, Mary Ellen and I got married on August the 10th, 1986, believe it or not. And in the last 26 years, we've not been separated more than a week at a time. Even when I had to go to Australia for business, I came right back. And Jesus said, he will always be with us. And that's the promise that I have to cling to. I don't know what all the ramifications are going to look like. I don't know what kind of persecution we're going to have. I don't know if I'm going to be arrested. I don't know if you're going to be arrested. Paul, Peter, and the gang all considered it a complete blessing to be arrested and beaten. Go figure. All I know is I want to be ready. Will you let me pray for you that you'll be ready? Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, keep us awake. Keep our love warm and hot. Keep our awareness good and sure. Help us to be part of your plan for bringing the gospel to every nation. And then, when you return, we thank you for coming back for us. We thank you for rescuing us from the evil one. We thank you for your love that brings you back to us. And we thank you for giving us a new life, a better life in eternity with you in the New Jerusalem. We claim your promise of salvation. We beg your forgiveness of sin. And we cling to you and know that you will not let us perish, but that you'll give us everlasting life. And for this we thank you in Jesus' holy name. Amen.